Okay, we're good.
We're good to go? Okay. Well, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. Just general rules of engagement. Make sure cell phones are silenced. This is not meant to be a debate per se, but if one candidate says something and you want to respond in any way, feel free. Other than that, I guess we'll get started. So this is our Oregon House District 38 endorsement interview for Willamette Week. We are joined by Daniel Nguyen.
I pronounce it Win, like W-I-N, yeah.
And Neelam Gupta. Thank you guys for being here. We're going to start with just brief introductions. So if you could take about 1 minute to introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for this position. We'll start with you, Daniel.
Sure. Well, hello, I'm Daniel Nguyen. I'm a candidate for House District 38. My background, my parents came to this country in 1975 as Vietnamese refugees, and our family came here, and we were able to establish ourselves as a new family in a new place. But I think that was also because we had the generosity of a lot of people that were here that were able to help us get back on our feet. My parents both got jobs at mills. My dad worked at the paper mill. My mom worked at the Pendleton wool mills. And then during that time, they were raising 5 kids at the time, so they were able to do their work at the mills, but then also be able to open a little restaurant to make sure that we could make ends meet with 7 mouths to feed in the household. It was a challenge that I look at my parents were able to do, and that really inspires me to do the work that I do. Currently, I'm a small business owner. I own Bamboo's, a Vietnamese restaurant. Really started with my parents, and then I continue to grow the business, and so now we have multiple locations, and we are really proud of the work we've done to be able to use our business and use our platform to be able to create real change and a benefit for our communities, but also for our workforce as well. I currently serve on the City Council, and Lake Oswego was elected there in 2018. And certainly the pandemic was not on our agenda, but certainly the pandemic has also provided a unique time where I was able to see the pandemic through the lens of as a parent, as a small business owner, but also as a policymaker. And so that's just a little bit about my background. That's also why I'm so compelled to serve. I feel like we need change, we need a new direction, and I believe that we are on that path. We have a chance to make things different.
Thanks, Neelam.
Well, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I currently serve on the Lake Oswego School Board. I have a 30-year history in Lake Oswego as the daughter of immigrants. I'm currently the Director of Clinical Supports, Integration, and Workforce in my day job at the Oregon Health Authority. Quite honestly, I never saw myself as running for public office. I left to attend college and graduate school and pursue my career in California, and then 7 years ago when we had an opportunity to move back, we chose Lake Oswego, and we live just down the street from my parents who still live in the same home. I was excited for my daughter to start as an elementary school student, but I didn't predict what a difficult time she would have. She encountered bias incidents as a 3rd grader, as a 4th grader, and as a 5th grader. And I was shocked. I will never forget when she came home and told me she had been physically attacked by a classmate for being different. This was my daughter who was looking down at her toes with a quivering voice. My daughter who always had a song on her lips, a smile in her heart, and a skip in her step. I felt alone, I felt isolated, and my heart broke, quite honestly. I never thought in Lake Oswego, of all places, that this could happen. And that's when I knew I had to step up and serve. And that's when I decided to pursue the school board. I was proud to be appointed when Senator Rob Wagner stepped down to step up as a Senate Majority Leader out of 24 applicants in June of 2020. And I was proud to be elected last May. And I'm proud to serve as the Vice Chair currently. And I'm ready to take that next step and serve in Salem.
Neelam, this is for you. What are a few things you've championed on your time on the school board?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the pandemic has been incredibly difficult. I'm really proud of my school board service. I have been on the front lines of passing levies, passing school bonds, setting new strategic priorities and directions for our schools. I think in particular, our students, I'm so proud that our schools have been able to remain open, and we're open for 5 full days this calendar year. And I'm really proud of the strategic direction we've set as a school district, creating a culture of belonging, addressing equitable academic outcomes, promoting health and resiliency, which has become a major issue, and then teaching and practicing sustainability so we can prepare our students to be future stewards of our environment.
Have you done anything, it sounds like the animating issue for you was racial bias or discrimination. Have you, as a board member, done anything to push the district? Because we've read about incidents in Lake Oswego for years. Not that Lake Oswego is any different, except you might have a different expectation of conduct there. So as a board member, have you done anything to further? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we're focusing on addressing bias and disproportionate discipline. We are addressing it through our curriculum. I love this idea of windows, mirrors, and sliding doors, that curriculum can be an opportunity for students to have a window into the experiences of others. They can also have it as a mirror to reflect their own experiences. And then when they gain that greater understanding and appreciation, then they can pass through to greater understanding, belonging, and building those bridges.
Have there been any specific changes to the curriculum that you've championed?
We are in the process of doing a new English language curriculum adoption. We have really looked at, we've added all kinds of wonderful books, including there's a wonderful author who is the Black Beverly Cleary, who's a local author, whose books we've added to our library. We've done a lot of professional development as a school district as well, created anti-bias circles, because our staff are hungry for this information. Our staff want to do the right thing, and they just need the support and the resources.
Danielle, what are a few issues that you've championed during your time on City Council?
Well, thanks for asking. Certainly when I started at City Council, one of the first things we do is goal setting. And I think that's a chance for all of us to really verbalize and actually memorialize things that we feel are important for our communities. And from the top of my list, from the time that I started running, and actually it was really brought to my attention when I was the first person of color ever elected to the City Council. And that was something that I had I was naive to. I did not know that in a city like Lake Oswego that surely with a population so close to Portland that there would have been others, but I was the first one. So it was really clear to me that how do I encourage more diversity, equity, and inclusion in the things that we do, not only in elected office, but also in the way that we function as a city. So the very first goal setting that we had, I made on top of my list was DEI. And at the time we had a different administration. it was a real uphill battle to actually have that conversation. But what we had to settle with for the first year was just settle with a task force that was allowed us to be able to look at DEI. And I look at this where I could continue to fight for, the ultimate goal is to be able to establish a permanent advisory board. But we've got to be able to work within our parameters, and knowing the structures that were in place, they weren't ready to even accept that we even have, that this was an important topic. There are some of my colleagues on council that have said, we don't believe DEI is an issue. And so that was some of the things that we had to work with. And so I kind of felt like I was on an island, but I think that we were able to finally, at the last cut of all of our council goals, we were able to establish a task force that was limited in scope, but I knew that that was our shot to be able to at least get the conversation started. And after that, once we started that conversation, there was a huge outpouring of people that finally were talking about this. And so I was able to get a lot of community support to eventually make that task force into something that became much broader than the 2 assigned tasks. The original task force was only to look at 2 items only. Was looking at the diversity of boards and commissions and looking at diversity within our city hiring, nothing else. Limited scope, 6 months start to finish. So we were able to take that and with the new administration, immediately take that, expand the scope of the DI task force, and then eventually they came back with recommendations to provide, number 1, hire a diversity officer, which was another FTE, a paid position within the city at the executive level, not just within HR. And that was something that was important to me, is that it's got to be for the entire organization, not just within one department. Second thing was that we established that DEI task force would become eventually the seed for the permanent advisory board to city council, because as we've seen, DEI is an issue that affects all functions of the city, not just boards and commissions, not just within city hiring. And so as a result of that, every year we have these goal settings, and I've seen much more progress with regards to DEI. We've seen our police force. We just swore in 4 new police officers, and it's apparent that it is working. We're able to get much more diverse candidates to apply. We're in these, and considering now to even get people to apply to these police officer positions is difficult as it is, but to be able to get the diversity and the quality of candidates speaks to our ability to be able to push the DEI initiatives forward. On that topic, in terms of economic development, our city is in a unique position. We're right next to Portland, but I've always felt that there's more opportunities for us to be able to create job opportunities within our communities. Oftentimes, people look at Lake Oswego really as a bedroom community, but we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of just our proximity to the city, proximity to the transportation, proximity to the hospitals, for example, and we have a lot of things going on. So one of the things I championed also was really looking at the redevelopment of the North Anchor project, which is that 2 city blocks that are right on Highway 43, that really, as you enter into Lake Oswego from Portland, those are right now it's an abandoned gas station and a building right there. So that is going to be the gateway to the city. We're going to be able to have a mixed-use property with a boutique hotel, retail on the ground floor, and also housing as well. And with that housing piece, we also want to make sure that there is an affordable housing component, which is another thing that I wanted to champion about, is recognizing that Lake Oswego is not just an enclave for wealthy people. We want to also make sure that we have workforce housing available. And so with every project that we do, we make it very clear to the developers, this is our aspirational goal, but we want you to exceed that. And so with the North Anchor project, we have obviously a beautiful apartments with the view of the lake and of the city, but we also have units that are earmarked for those that make 70% of the AMI, the adjusted median income. So we want to be able to look at, affordable housing isn't just subsidized housing, but it's also housing for those that work in our medical facilities, work in our nursing homes, work in our retail shops. We want to be able to have people that can live in the community that also work in our schools. So that was something that was really important to me in terms of affordability as well. thinking about how do we also function as a city. We're in a place where we're blessed with a lot of natural resources. We have, I believe, the nation's largest tree canopy, urban tree canopy. And that's due to the hard work of a lot of people in our community that really have made the environment and climate change a top priority. We have, not only do we have the Sustainability Advisory Board, which is a permanent board within the city, but we also have the Lake Oswego Sustainability Network, in which we're so much blessed with because they provide council with feedback and ideas on how do we actually make sure that as a city operation, how are we minimizing our impact on the climate. And one of the things we did just this past year, which was one of those few times when we had a split council vote. It was a 4-3 vote, and it was to make the decision to hire the city contractor that does all of our landscaping, and we chose to award it to a company that was going to be using battery-powered, electric-powered landscaping equipment versus the gas-powered.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of discussion about, well, it's a lot more money, and then why don't we wait until the next 2 years after that, the technology gets cheaper. But I felt, and some of my colleagues felt that it was important that we do something now. It costs money now, but it's something that we can't wait for. If we look at the reports with regards to how much time we have to actually make an impact on climate change, we don't have 2 years to wait until the technology gets cheaper for us to implement it. So those are things that I'm proud to champion: climate change, affordable housing, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's other things too, but those are my top three.
Neil, going back to you, what's one bill that you would plan to introduce to the legislature if you were elected?
I've devoted my career to my 3 issue areas, which are building healthier communities, really building healthier schools with an eye on COVID recovery and resilience, and then ensuring economic vitality. I think in particular, workforce development is going to be a sustained multi-year investment. I'm really excited by some of the historic investments the legislature made in this past short session, such as Future Ready Oregon, but that's just going to be a start. It's historic investments in certain sectors like healthcare, manufacturing, but I would champion even more. I have been on the front lines of building career pathways, building pipelines for home care workers, for nursing assistants, for those across our healthcare sector. And so I would really look for what's working and build upon that. Mm-hmm. So that's a really important priority.
Do you have any specific ideas for bills that you would introduce, or how you would foster those areas?
Yeah. One area in particular that my office is going to be leading is a nursing workforce study to really look at some of the difficult issues that nurses have faced. In particular, and throughout my career, I've really worked on advancing entry-level staff into strong living wage jobs. And I'm excited because the study is due to the legislature November 15th. And once I'm elected, I can then champion legislative solutions to that critical issues, because nurses really are the lifeblood of our healthcare system. And
isn't the issue just pay? Mostly pay?
It's more than pay. It's also about working conditions, burnout, building resiliency as well.
Daniel, what's one bill that you would plan to introduce?
Well, very much similar to my colleague. Certainly, workforce development, economic recovery from the pandemic. However, my approach is going to be different. You know, when we're elected for 2 years, and I think about this is that we've got to be effective in what we do. 2 years, just to kind of put things in perspective, 2 years is what the beginning of the pandemic was. We started this pandemic 2 years ago, and we've seen how our lives have changed in 2 years, right? And I think about my role. If I am elected, I've got the same amount of time, and I think for me, urgency is of utmost importance. I think that's something where we can't just put things in the pipeline and wait when this is maybe in the second or third term that will affect change. As a small business owner, we didn't have a chance to be able to say, let's put things in the pipeline, hopefully things will get better in years 3 and 4 of the pandemic, because we wouldn't have survived. And that's something that I feel like, we can talk about a lot of these grand plans, but there is an urgent need now, right? And those are things where, we need to address pay. We need to address working conditions, but we need to do it now. There are things that we have within our toolbox now that we can be doing.
Like what?
For example, the pay issue, right? If we're talking about increasing pay for living wage jobs, we've also got to be thinking about how are we providing those supports to different agencies, different state agencies that rely on reimbursements, for example, from the state. We also need to be thinking about too, if we want to be able to increase, pay for people that work in private business or nonprofits. We've also got to be thinking about how do we make it so that they're able to also grow their businesses, so that they can be able to make sure that they can actually pay more in wages. Those are things that we are dealing with right now. I know plenty of businesses, my business including myself, that we want to grow our business, but we are hamstringed by not being able to have enough people in the workforce that feel like they can actually make enough to be able to support their families. Yet on the other hand, if we can't have enough people, it's like chicken before the egg or the egg before the chicken, where it's cyclical, where it's one relies on the other. We can't grow a business. We don't have the workforce. If we can't grow a business, it makes it very difficult for us to continue to provide the backup that we need. We're in like many other industries, people are getting burnt out because we don't have extra people to be able to help out. We've had to think about our hours. We have to close early. You've seen, I could probably guess that many of us in this room probably have been to our businesses that close earlier than we would typically expect them to, and it's really because we're dealing with a workforce that it's underpaid and it's burnt out. Mm-hmm. So those are things where I think about specific bills that are looking at the low-hanging fruit, things that we can tackle and address within our first 2-year term. That's something that's important to me, and that means it's not a specific bill that I want to look at this more holistically. Look, where are we falling short? There's other things that I think about with regards to other topic areas, right? For example, homelessness and public safety. There are things that I really feel like we've got to act with urgency. We've got to do something now, and not just be thinking about waiting for studies to come out or we already know that there is a deficiency. And if we're waiting for this perfect policy solution that is going to be the silver bullet that solves all of our problems, that's something that I'm not going to support.
What would you do in regards to homelessness now?
I think in terms right now, we've got to look at the root causes, right? Homelessness really is a symptom of our failures. We failed in a lot of ways. People fall into the cracks with regards to housing affordability, but along with that also, we can also look at a lot of people that are on the street are also struggling with mental health.
So what are some immediate solutions that we could do now?
Immediate solutions right now, I would say providing funding for shelters. But also at the same time involve our community partners to look at from the state level if we can provide supports in terms of providing mental health services, addiction recovery services, then also partner with our local communities in different cities that know how best to be able to address the needs of the people that are living on the streets. Those are things where I feel like we need to make investments now, and that's something I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues, but also looking at some of the subject matter experts to know, will these investments really create that impact? And so I don't want to come in with preconceived bills, because I'm also learning too. I think we're all learning here. I don't think any of us can say that we are subject matter experts on how to solve this. And so I want to come in and look at the solution, but also talk with my colleagues too. And that's something that I feel like is lacking and is really getting in the way of getting this urgent action that we need to have in place.
If you wouldn't mind, I would love to respond, because I've been on the front lines of creating solutions for homelessness. I've also been on the front lines of addressing, issues of domestic violence and sexual assault, and I recognize sometimes you just have to put solutions out there. We have to, do things and learn from our experiences. So, recognizing that we need some, immediate action. I absolutely support immediate action and common sense solutions that, because right now we've seen that too many people have been left behind. And so I also firmly believe that, just taking houselessness as an issue, that, we need targeted solutions to the problems we wish to solve. Whether it's middle housing that will allow people who are in our workforce, like teachers, like firefighters, to live in our communities. Whether it's services or housing for people who need a little bit more support, or supportive housing that requires like the full continuum of wraparound services. So I have developed those solutions. I have that real world experience in doing that, and I will bring that to Salem.
One of the things I also wanted to point out too is I think that to kind of illustrate what I talk about in terms of the sense of urgency. When we saw the wildfires that happened in the fall of 2020, those were things that we were all watching and seeing. We certainly saw there was what I certainly recognized was there was a real disconnect with how our communities reacted to the needs of the Santiam fires versus those that were in Southern Oregon in the Rogue Valley fires. And I think in looking at our response, it seemed like, and from my perspective, and actually I saw that when I went down to Southern Oregon, we went down to Southern Oregon, we saw that population was mainly an immigrant population, a lot of Latino workers that were living in apartment complexes that were completely burnt down, that didn't have resources, they didn't have the luxury of getting into the RVs, and they're living out of their RVs, they had lost everything. So we basically look at ourselves, what do we have in our own kitchen cabinet that we can do? So I'm a restaurant owner, I'm able to provide food service, I'm able to provide a truck. And so I serve on the board for Immigration Counseling Services, which is the 90% of our clientele is the Latino community. And they were coming to us as we need help because we've lost all of our documents, we could not get out in time. OHSU partners with us too. They were able to collect all the supplies that we had at the different hospitals. But the problem is that we couldn't get those supplies in a place to actually transport them to Medford. So I volunteered our box trucks to take up all the supplies, get them loaded. We drove down with Immigration Counseling Services. OHSU met us down there, and they were able to provide the mental health triage. And we were able to distribute really the basic things like diapers, socks, undergarments, food. And we were able in a weekend to mobilize and be able to provide assistance to 500 families. And that was a lifeline. Those are things where I feel like, we've got ready and willing partners in our communities that we can mobilize within days and actually get that stuff out. Because again, I look at my role as a legislator. How do we make those connections? How do we actually get boots on the ground to actually help people? Because that's what I'm feeling is that, we are getting too caught up in developing policy that is bulletproof, that is perfect. And meanwhile, our communities are hurting. We went down there, and again, having culturally specific response is so important. There was another group that showed up provide some support, but they came out with shovels and they came with these sifters so that people could sift through the burnt belongings. It missed the mark. There was nothing left.
Yeah.
What are they going to sift through? They're going to sift through toilets and fixtures.
Could I shift the subject and have each of you very briefly tell us about a mistake that you've made in your professional career and what you learned from it? Elam, you first, please.
That's a great question. A mistake I made in my professional career. I think at times, I am a quiet, shy person. I wear glasses. When I was a kid, they were really thick. I don't color my hair. And so sometimes I can be a little wonky. And that's part of the reason that, I have been a policy and systems change agent all my life. And I, have learned, particularly in my role as a school board member and as a state official, how to take complex information and translate it into easy to understand information, so that way communities can have the information they need to propose solutions.
So where's the mistake?
The mistake for me is sometimes being a little too technical. In the past, I would get caught up in my headspace and sometimes get lost in the details. Whereas, with experience, and I do a lot of work with communities throughout the state, both in the Portland metro area as well as very rural communities. So I recognize the broad range of different needs across our state. And so, that was one of my early mistakes, sometimes, getting caught up in the details.
Great, thanks. Okay.
I would say a mistake that I often think about is that just not speaking up enough. I felt like sometimes there were times when I was a younger person that when I would see things that happened to my mom and dad when they were at these farmers markets, and they were obviously being discriminated against because they didn't speak the language and they felt like they couldn't speak up. And with me being a younger person, and I could have said, wait, this isn't fair. This is not how things work, but I was too afraid. And my parents taught me, don't rock the boat. I was too scared that if we spoke up, that we wouldn't be invited back next year.
Have you done that in your professional career where you felt like you should have said something and you didn't?
I think about that, like, yes, I have. And that's something where I feel like, I'm trying to do that now that I have, a few more years of experience. I've got a different perspective, and I think I have a greater voice to actually to make a difference. And so,
can you cite a specific example of when you didn't speak up?
Well, it has to do with I don't want to get into too many details because it's kind of confidential, but I would say it had to do with being on a panel where the majority of my colleagues were thinking this way, and with me being the youngest person on this panel. And I suppose the least experience of them all, I felt like I had to succumb to the groupthink, even though I wanted to say that no, this isn't fair. This is not consistent with what what we're saying are the criteria. But I just felt like I'm the lone vote, and that's something that continues to stick with me, and that I think about too. And how do we get to that? And I think that I might have shared with you before, when I first joined council, I was the youngest person on council. I was also the only person of color. And those are things where it was a flashback to what had happened to me earlier in my professional career when I had that. Again, it's something that, it's a mistake, but I think it also helps to inform me as I go forward.
So we're almost out of time. If you guys could take 30 seconds and tell us why you're a better choice, it may be, got two very strong candidates here, but we got to pick one. So tell us why you're better for this position than your opponent. Well, Daniel, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I'm a problem solver. Running a business, all my life really. I grew up my parents had a small business, and then now as a parent, but also a business owner, and living through the pandemic really has shaped how I legislate, how I think about problem solving. The past 4 years also afforded me an opportunity to work on city council. I was elected in 2018, and having gone through the things that we've done through, I've been in looking at this city government. It's really, it parallels very much of the work that we do at the state, but just on a smaller scale. So with issues with regards to land use, economic development, DEI, taxation. We have departments with public safety, fire department. I've been at the table on the city side negotiating labor contracts for municipal workers, for police workers, police officers, and the fire departments. We also are very much engaged with community input on varying issues such as parks, for example. We also collaborate with other agencies such as Metro to address the regional housing needs. We also interface with the school board as well when we do things like the city's building a facility that will be shared with the school. We're building a recreational facility that will provide access to the school because the school will no longer have their own swimming pool, for example. So those are things where I feel like my responsibilities serving on the council for 4 years really dovetail very well with some of the work that we'll be doing at the state legislature.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, I think the COVID-19 pandemic in particular highlighted the inadequacies in our healthcare, workforce, and education systems. And I have extensive experience in making systemic changes in healthcare, strengthening and diversifying the workforce, and bringing people together to build common sense solutions in our community. I've seen what happens when people don't have access to adequate health care, good jobs, safe housing, and a decent education, and how our most vulnerable communities can get left behind. I am proud to serve as the vice chair on the Lake Oswego School Board. Just yesterday, I was appointed as the chair of our budget committee. I know how to balance budgets. I have experience on the front lines of developing solutions, working with communities, and really changing policy and systems. And I also am really proud that I was the first person of color to serve on the Lake Oswego School Board. And I'm also really proud of the strong partnership we have with our city, as Daniel mentioned, in building the first ever public pool for our community. And there's so much more partnership that we do, building safe routes to schools, and more. And so I am ready to bring this knowledge, my life experiences, and my professional expertise to the Oregon legislature and serve as the state representative for House District 38.
All right, 2 more quick things. First, can we get you guys' ages real quick, Daniel?
Sure, I'm 43.
Okay, Neil?
I want to make sure I get it right. I'm 51.
51, okay.
Yeah.
And then we always do sort of a fun question. Our question for this year is, what is the moment where you feel like the pandemic ended for you? Also acknowledging that it's not quite over yet, but maybe we feel like we're a little bit out of the woods. Daniel?
I would say when my kids were able to go back to school.
Okay.
I would say when my greatest moment of joy was when we were able to reopen the schools to 5 full days and keep our schools open, particularly throughout Omicron, and also deal with lockdowns, quite frankly. You know, we had a lockdown due to the TikTok day of school violence threat, which impacted my daughter. I mean, that was actually the second lockdown she had been through. She had been through another lockdown in the LA area where someone got killed in our community. And I was proud to go through the schools and thank the staff and the teachers and the educators for their wonderful service.
All right, well, thanks to you both. We really appreciate